How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Mother Sponge 5000. Today is March 3rd, 2022. As of today, we're going to forecast a spring season for the entirety of the lower 48. Will you experience a warmer than average winter? Will you experience a cooler than average winter? I'll attempt to answer those questions in this video by taking a look at several different factors, such as the Nino 3.4 outlook over the next several months, as well as other factors such as sea surface temperatures and the current drought monitor throughout the United States, as those do play a major role in terms of what to expect going into the spring season. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. Make sure to like if you like this video, and make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather-related content. So the first thing we're going to need to take a look at is the Enzo Outlook over the next several months. So we are now, of course, in the early month of March, in the early part of March. So it's pretty much the meteorological start of the hurricane season, but the astronomical start of the spring season. Did I say hurricane season? I'm not sure, but the spring season I meant to say starts right around March 21st. And as you can see, that for the months of March and April, we're more likely than not going to experience a La Nina, with the chance of a neutral increasing as we head further and further into the spring months, closer to the summer months, where the neutral chance of a neutral phase occurring does increase to the point where by the time we reach the May and June timeframe, we're more likely than not going to experience a neutral phase, with La Nina phase being less likely during those 2 months, and during May around 40% and June being right around 35% respectively. So it's definitely an important factor we're going to need to keep in mind as the Nino 3.4 sea surface temperatures play a major role in terms of what type of pattern we're going to see this spring. However, I'd say for most of the spring, we're more likely than not going to experience La Nina type conditions, because even as we enter a neutral phase into the months of May and June, more likely than not, the neutral phase is going to be sort of a weak neutral phase, just barely in the neutral phase, to where the sea surface temperatures will more reflect those of a La Nina than, let's say, necessarily a neutral phase. And of course, it takes a while for the atmosphere to react to changes with the sea surface temperature. So even if we are in the neutral phase during the months of May and June, it does take a while for the neutral pattern to actually shape up in the United States. So that's definitely something we're going to need to keep in mind. To see what type of conditions you should expect during a La Nina, you of course see that it's typically a lot warmer throughout the southeastern portion of the United States. This extends further westward as well into Texas, and for a lot of the southern United States, it's mainly a lot drier for the most part. This extends as far west as Southern California, all the way to the east coast of Florida and Georgia, where it's a lot drier than average. But if you look just to the north, you see typically it's a lot cooler and more moist than average, especially towards the Pacific Northwest, as a result of a polar jet stream dip. This does bring a lot of troughs from the British Columbia region further southward, which does increase and enhance the precipitation and the amount of cool air that moves further southward as a result of a strong northwesterly flow associated with this polar jet stream dip. And you see it's also typically more moist than average, I'd say right around the Ohio River Valley, of course, as a result of a major jet stream dip. So we definitely need to sort of reflect our forecast based on the current La Nina pattern that's expected to stay over the next couple of months, because this does play a big role in terms of what type of conditions you should expect for the spring season. But of course, it is far from the only factor we're going to need to take a look at. And just because we're going to experience a La Nina does not mean that the conditions will necessarily reflect this map 100% or even close to 100%, because we're definitely going to need to pay close attention to other factors to really determine what type of conditions you should expect this spring. So if I were to move forward, you see that another thing we're going to need to pay close attention to is the La Nina influence on the severe weather season, because you see that during a La Nina, we typically receive a lot more tornadoes than average, especially towards the Tornado Valley, approaching the southeast as well. And my assumption is as a result of the pronounced jet stream dip that's very noticeable during La Nina. That typically enhances the amount of instability throughout the United States. So as a result, we do see a lot more lift and thunderstorm activity throughout the Midwest during a La Nina than, let's say, an El Nino, where of course the polar jet stream is well far north of the United States and Canadian border. And you see that during hailstorms are far more likely during a La Nina. So based on the fact that we're likely going to experience more of a La Nina this spring, or at least La Nina type conditions, I'd say the chance of severe weather and a more powerful severe weather spring season is more likely at this point, because typically during a La Nina we see a lot more lift in the atmosphere and instability for numerous more tornadoes and hailstorms to occur. So that's something you guys around the Midwest and Tornado Valley need to pay close attention to as well. And even the Southeast could experience a lot of severe weather this spring, especially with La Nina type conditions. Now, let's take a look at the temperature anomalies during La Nina spring. So pretty much what I did is that I took every La Nina spring from the 1950s up until now, and I put them in a climatology data set, and it compares the temperatures and the precipitation to the long-term average, which is between 1991 and 2020, to get a good idea of what type of temperatures we should expect during a La Nina compared to the long-term average. And you see that along the West Coast, we typically see temperatures a lot cooler than average. This extends to Colorado, Utah, Nevada. And for a lot of the East Coast, you see that while temperatures are cooler than average, they're just barely cooler than average. And I think these temperatures, I'd say anywhere that's east of, let's say, the Kansas-Colorado border, anywhere that's east of that, you guys, it's more likely that another factor could offset the fact that a La Nina does bring cooler than average temperatures throughout the eastern half of the United States. I think that warmer than average sea surf temperatures throughout the Gulf of Mexico and Atlantic could easily offset the fact that we do see cooler than average temperatures throughout the United States, or another factor such as a drought. However, for the West Coast, you see that temperature anomalies are around 2 degrees below average Fahrenheit, which is quite far from average, relatively speaking. So it's a little bit harder to potentially offset the fact that of the cooler than average temperatures you do receive during a La Nina with another factor. But it's easier for those east of the Colorado and Kansas border. So just because it does look like you are experiencing cooler than average temperatures throughout the eastern portion of the United States does not mean that you will necessarily experience that. And this could go maybe the same for the West Coast, but it's going to be a lot harder for that to happen for the West Coast because, of course, the temperatures are far below average typically during a La Nina. But the East Coast, it definitely could be offset by the fact that maybe there's warmer than average sea surface temperatures. So that's definitely something to keep in mind when making this forecast. Now, in terms of precipitation anomalies, you see that one area definitely does have a big difference, that there's a big difference from average, is right around Texas, where you do see that the precipitation is a lot drier than average. Is a lot drier than average throughout Texas, and this extends further northward, right around the northern portion of the Mississippi River Valley as well. And we do see some areas along the Pacific Northwest experiencing more moist than average conditions. This is as a result, of course, of Pacific jet moving through during a La Nina, which typically does bring more troughs along the coast of the Pacific Northwest. So there definitely is that chance of a more moist than average spring as a result of that. And you see that what's interesting is that the southeast portions of the southeast, at least right around Mississippi, Alabama, and right around the Memphis area, you guys do experience more moist than average conditions typically. And this could be big because this could be the area where the most severe weather occurs as a result of a La Nina. So that's something we want to keep in mind, that typically during Texas is a lot drier than average. The Pacific Northwest and portions of the Southeast are typically a lot more moist than average. So that's definitely something we're going to need to pay close attention to when making this forecast as well. Now, taking a look at the Drought Monitor, which I think is another huge factor, because it's not only the precipitation that matters when it comes to a Drought Monitor, and the Drought Monitor doesn't only necessarily forecast what to expect when it comes to the amount of precipitation you occur. It could also forecast the temperatures that you see in the future, because if you're under a very strong drought, typically it's a lot drier than average, and as a result of how dry it is, not only will there be a limited amount of, let's say, clouds in the sky to block that shortwave radiation or reflect that shortwave radiation from the sun from hitting the surface, where the surface could absorb that energy very rapidly, but also the soil and the rivers in general are a lot more arid, and as a result, it's typically a lot easier for the surface to warm up faster when the ground is very dry, because what water does, or moisture does, is it absorbs a lot of heat, and as it absorbs a lot of heat, a lot of that shortwave radiation is used to pretty much phase change of water from a liquid into a gas, which is of course water vapor. When there isn't enough moisture on the soil, then that means that there isn't a lot of shortwave radiation that will necessarily be wasted on phase changing the liquid water into a gas, and more of that energy will be absorbed by the surface, which would mean that you would experience warmer than average conditions during a dry pattern in your area. And you see that a lot of the West Coast, pretty much west of the Missouri River, are experiencing conditions a lot drier than average, with the exceptions of the extreme northwestern portions of the Pacific Northwest. And so this definitely could be a big factor, and could definitely make for a warmer than average spring for the West Coast. However, again, during La Nina, we do typically see cooler than average conditions. So it's going to be interesting to see which one wins out between the two, because during a La Nina, of course, temperatures are typically a lot cooler than average. But since we're experiencing drier than average conditions right now, and it's most likely going to continue over the next couple months, that could mean you're in for a warmer than average spring. So we're definitely going to need to pay close attention to how strong La Nina is, or how strong the drought will be over the next couple months, because that will make a big difference in terms of the temperatures you experience. But what I could say confidently is that the west, anywhere west of the Missouri River Valley, will experience drier than average conditions for this spring, because of course a drought is very difficult to get rid of, and it's very unlikely that within only less than a month or two out that this drought will completely go away, unless there's a major storm, which doesn't seem likely, especially with the drought and a huge ridge that's dominating the West Coast. So I do expect it to be drier than average, and potentially maybe warmer than average, specifically in the areas further eastward, maybe further southeastward towards Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, New Mexico, that sort of area. While for the areas further westward, I'd say west of the Rocky Mountain region, it will be a little bit tougher to forecast, but I do think the La Nina will win out overall and bring cooler than average conditions. But there is that possibility that it could be warmer than average, depending on how strong this drought is. But the thing that really does give me more confidence with the spring forecast is taking a look at the climatology models, because if you were to take a look at what the climatology models are saying when it comes to the 3-month average of temperatures, saying from April, May, and June, you see that Texas, Oklahoma, this area is a lot warmer than is expected to be a lot warmer than average this spring. And extending further eastward, you see that a lot of the eastern half of the United States is also experiencing warmer than average temperatures, while the Pacific Northwest is primarily experiencing cooler than average conditions based on what the climatology model is saying. So I will say with confidence that right around the Pacific Northwest, as a result of a strong La Nina, as a result of the climatology model stating that we're more likely than not going to experience cooler than average conditions throughout the Pacific Northwest. I will say that most likely you will experience cooler than average conditions in this area, but in the areas further southward, while La Nina typically does bring cooler than average conditions in this area, I think the fact that there's a drought and the climatology model is stating that it's going to be warmer than average in this area, I do think that the southwestern portion of the United States, at least, will be slightly warmer than average, with the highest temperatures being more specifically right around Texas. So that's something we're going to need to keep in mind. Now, taking a look at the temperature forecast when it comes to the 3-month forecast of the CFS model, you see that it's expected to be a lot more moist right around the Ohio River Valley and areas further northwestward as a result of a pronounced jet stream dip that's induced by a very powerful that brings a lot of low pressure systems further southward. Now, and taking a look right around Texas, Colorado, Kansas, it's a lot drier than average. So, and based on the fact that we're in a drought too, it's highly likely that Texas and areas in this region will experience drier than average conditions. So make sure to keep that in mind throughout the Midwest for this spring. Now, let me also show you another factor that I think could make a difference, and like I said earlier, is the sea surface temperatures, because if the sea surface temperatures along the coast are a little bit warmer, that could maybe raise the temperature maybe a degree or two on average, and that could be huge when talking about what type of conditions you typically will experience this spring. And you see that for a lot of the Atlantic coast, including the Gulf of Mexico, sea surface temperatures are a lot warmer than average. So along the coast, I think it's more likely you will experience sea surface temperatures warmer than average. And taking a look at the Pacific, you see that sea surface temperatures are, for the most part, cooler than average. So along the west coast, I do expect cooler than average conditions as a result of cooler than average sea surface temperatures. So that's another factor I'm definitely paying close attention to when making this spring forecast. Now, let me show you guys my spring forecast for 2022. So for the East Coast, I'm expecting it to be more mild and dry than average. This is as a result of warmer than average sea surface temperatures along the Atlantic, which could raise the temperature right around 1 to 2 degrees above average, which could be huge. And also, it's due to the fact that the CFS computer model is also expecting a warmer than average spring. So that's something that I'm also taking into consideration when making this forecast. And also in areas further right around Florida in the southeast and even portions of the East Coast, you guys are under drier than average conditions. So that will make it more likely for warmer than average temperatures to occur along the East Coast. And for the Ohio River Valley, so I expect it to be more moist than average, as well as more cool than average, as a result of a pronounced jet stream dip that typically happens during a La Nina. And we will also see, and the CFS model is also forecasting a more moist and cool than average spring for the Ohio River Valley and areas further northward. And I do expect a more potent severe weather threat as a result of a La Nina, which typically does bring more lift to the atmosphere, as well as more instability for a more powerful severe weather threat to occur. So I think tornadoes and thunderstorms are going to be far more likely right around the Ohio River Valley and right around the Memphis area, the southeast central portion of the United States. And taking a look at the Midwest, I'm expecting it to be very warm and dry as a result of the drought that's going on, and the southern United States typically does experience drier than average conditions during a La Nina, and I expect it to be cooler and more moist than average for the Pacific Northwest. So this is my spring forecast for 2022. If you want even more in-depth forecast for your location, just make sure to comment your location down below, and I'll make sure to give you guys my best forecast when it comes to your spring in your area. So make sure to comment down below if you're curious for the spring conditions in your location. So, but anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. Make sure to like if you like this video. Make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather-related content. And I hope you guys have a great day.